Have you noticed how fear narrows your thinking?
What happens when your nervous system is activated, but you're still expected to make clear decisions?
What would love do in this moment in time? Thanks for joining us today at the Healing Medicine Podcast. Who are you listening to? I am Dr. Jessie Mahoney, and my co-host is Dr. Ni-Cheng and We are two board-certified physicians who bring decades of experience to the conversation about wellness. If you crave more ease and aspire to rediscover your love for medicine and life, one mindful step at a time, you are in the right place. We hope you'll love today's episode, and if so, please share it. A reminder that nothing in our podcast is medical advice. Welcome to today's episode. When the world feels unsteady, choose intention, not panic. The intention behind today's episode is to offer some tools and steadiness in the face of so many physicians and leaders and humans feeling activated, overwhelmed, and unsure how to respond to the world right now. We are offering it as an invitation to step out of the urgency and reactivity and hopefully try to restore some clarity and choice in what we fully acknowledge is an unprecedented time in the world and in our country, and that many of us are feeling unsteady and unsure about how to move forward. We hope to offer some mindfulness tools, some mindset tools, some somatic tools, a conversation of some tools to help move through trauma responses. And it's really a conversation about staying human in hard times and choosing intention. Remembering that one of the things that we can do is regulate our nervous systems, noticing how naturally our nervous systems are activated in response to real instability and real challenges and real scary things. And this isn't to bypass the reality of what's happening. It's to offer some tools so that we can show up grounded, steady, and as leaders moving forward.
So let's set the stage for the current state of the country and, in many cases, parts of the world. There is a collective sense of fear, grief, and instability for many right now. Many are experiencing moral distress and an exhaustion of multiple levels down to mind, body, and spirit. Also, I want to just call out that the nervous system being activated at this moment in time is expected and it is normal. And especially, particularly for people of color right now. So that minority stress, myself included, living that currently, and racial trauma are very real. And I'm feeling this very, very deeply right now. The shock at current events and the sense of urgency and wanting to do something and wanting to fix things doesn't mean that we're failing. It simply means that we are responding in a way that makes us human. So, on a personal note, the current state of the country is not what I had envisioned to be currently living in when I immigrated here over 40 years ago. It really hurts actually to acknowledge that. And I remember that my parents sacrificed so much, their careers, their homes, their language, their culture, their family and friends to bring my brother and I here all those years ago. And also ultimately an environment of safety where everyone else looked like them and me and my brother. But now I'm afraid every day for myself, for my kids, for my parents, the rest of my family, And even though we've been citizens for over 40 years, I still have that same fear simply because we look different. And even more so with current events, with the loss of lives of people who also bore the roles that I share very intimately as a mother and also as a healer, simply compound that ongoing fear and sadness and anger. And so naming that there is a lot of grief happening on multiple levels.
And to be clear, what we're offering today is not to not feel grief or not feel anger, because that's reasonable and expected, but it's how we move forward in the face of feeling that. And the lens of this podcast today is also from the lens of people who are healers, who, many of whom, and this has come up repeatedly in coaching this week, are being asked to show up and continue to work in environments when they and their families are not feeling safe at home and feeling unsteady inside, and yet we still show up and do this work because that's the nature of the work. And so how do we navigate how we feel, and how can we navigate it with compassion? Because I see many physicians in particular judging themselves for maybe feeling numb or feeling disengaged or feeling exhausted and depleted or wanting to check out for a bit. And I would offer that that is a normal human response. It doesn't make you a bad person. I think in healthcare, we are always expected to show up and always expected to be the fixers and the saviors. And our invitation today, one of them, is that it's okay to pause and take care of yourself. And in fact, that might be the wisest and most helpful thing you could do, is to show up in the world with a regulated nervous system, since most of the world is not feeling regulated right now. And that whatever amount of time you need to do that is going to be worthwhile to take. And that even though it might seem like you don't have the time, are there tiny micro moments and micro practices that could help you? So a nervous system lens here recognizes that our nervous system responses to situations such as we've witnessed in our country recently, fight, flight, freeze, are adaptive, but they aren't necessarily strategic, and they aren't necessarily helpful. And so I think just recognizing what your default reaction is and having compassion for it and choosing how you might want to show up. And so we often talk about name it to tame it. So you might want to notice if your response is urgency, or your response is numbness, or maybe your response is overfunctioning, trying to solve things and trying to do too much. And to recognize that working on your nervous system first, I see it as it's the first step. It's like the gateway between where you are now and where you would like to be and the impact you might like to make. But we can't make that impact from a reactive fight or flight, freeze, or even fawn reaction. We can't do that until we're steady. And for many of us, we can't even see what that is for us to do until we have a steady nervous system. And so when our nervous system is activated, our prefrontal cortex and our higher, wiser brain are not accessible. And so that's where we start making these urgent reactive decisions about what we might want to do that might not want to be the impact or way we will wish we had shown up in the future. Our future self might not be proud. Our future self would always be proud if we paused to regulate our nervous system in some helpful way.
So a lot of trauma is happening and will be happening, most likely. And most people of the world have experienced some form of trauma. So I just wanted to share a bit of data. World Mental Health Survey Consortium reports that 70% of adults have had at least one experience with trauma in their life. And there are 5 main different types of events: witnessing death or serious injury. Hello, people in healthcare. Experiencing the unexpected death of a loved one, being mugged being in a life-threatening accident and experiencing a life-threatening illness or injury. Those 5 types of events account for the vast majority of trauma exposure. So let's talk a bit more about this word trauma, because there's a couple of different definitions. It literally means wound, shock, or injury. And I wanted to share, and I'll post in the show notes, the wonderful Psychology Today article that I'm summarizing here. So the word means wound, shock, or injury, but psychological trauma is basically what we're talking about here, that many people are experiencing right now. And it is basically an experience of emotional distress from an overwhelming event that hinders the ability to enable us to emotionally process it in a healthy way. So one time, or it can be a repeated, serious type of event that keeps happening or similarly occurring, that's harmful or life-threatening to oneself or loved ones, and also to people who look like you and me. Ultimately, trauma threatens our sense of safety. So what happens afterwards? There can be a lot of replaying of the events. There can be rumination. There can be perseveration. It can become kind of all-encompassing in taking up a lot of real estate in our minds. And that experience of trauma can lead to downstream changes in our own brain functioning, leading to hypersensitivity to threats, like this ongoing state of hypervigilance, for instance. So immediate normal human physiologic trauma responses can include the sense of shock, feeling afraid, feeling angry, feeling sad, having some difficulty concentrating, and then also feeling helpless and hopeless. And so what happens during an experience with trauma? Similarly to an experience with stress, the amygdala is activated, which preps the rest of the body physiologically for sympathetic nervous system drive. As Jessie mentioned, it's a fight, flight, or freeze response. Short term, you might feel some fear, anxiety, the shock, and anger and aggression also are all normal responses to trauma that are kind of inaccurately protective in the moment, but not necessarily in the long term helpful for our physiology. So these difficult emotions and responses normally dissipate with time, but they can linger. And that's where the long term consequences of living with all of those difficult emotions can arise. So you can develop extreme anxiety, you can develop depression, survivor's guilt, a sense of dissociation, anhedonia, and post-traumatic stress disorder. And the amygdala can remain hyperactive throughout all of this. That can lead to further perturbations. I wanted to also share about minority stress. So minority stress definition from the American Psychological Association are the both physiological and psychological effects associated with adverse social conditions experienced by basically anyone who is considered quote unquote other, based on ethnic, racial, sexual, and gender differences, other people who are further stigmatized within different social groups, for instance. And the sources of minority stress include experiencing prejudice, discrimination, harassment, verbal or physical violence, having the expectation or experiencing unjust rejection by others, also the active concealment of one's minority identity, and then also internalized racism, for instance, like internalizing the negative societal attitudes about one's minority group that then ultimately results in one having a negative self-view. And ultimately, this minority stress does contribute to the increased rates of mental health issues amongst minority groups like depression, suicide, anxiety, substance use, as well as workplace and body image issues, eating disorders, and then comorbid conditions like high blood pressure and heart disease, to name a few. And what we are offering, especially in today's episode, and really in all of our podcast episodes, especially the ones also with mindful moments, which is like 99% of the episodes, is that mindfulness is a choice. It's an intention that you can set as a choice for responding, not to numb, not to bypass everything that you're feeling, but more as a physiologic downshift from that activated sympathetic state into choosing one that can foster parasympathetic tone. And one really easy way to access that is breath work, taking deep breaths, inhaling through the nose, blowing out birthday candles, and exhaling 2 to 4 times longer than your inhale. Box breathing, 4-7-8 breath work, pranayama, other yogic breath work practices. Many of those can activate the parasympathetic nervous system quite quickly to help bring about a healthier physiological response.
And yoga can, of course, do that. And yoga for me is one of those that's helpful, especially in moments like this, because there's a movement to it. So sometimes when we are really activated or experiencing PTSD or something like that, it's very hard to sit still and sit and not move. And so for me, that's how I found yoga to be one of the most reliable, helpful ways to help me unwind my nervous system. Not so much as a way to like calm down in the face of something, or it's really to have access to my inner knowing and access to a steady response rather than reaction. And for those of you listening, I just want to offer that the last 2 weeks I have taught classes very specifically on this topic. And so what Would Love Do in This Moment was one of them. And Peace Begins With Me, which we talked about in a previous podcast. And I talked about approaching yourself from that lens and not just talking about it, but living it, feeling it, embodying it. And that can be a really super helpful way to begin the journey. And reflecting, what is the journey that you are on? I think we very often in medicine want to do all the things and respond in all the ways and jump in quickly and make sure that we do enough, whatever that is. And I wanted to offer this idea. There is an activist named Jackie Summers who talks about choosing lanes of helping or lanes of responding in moments of crisis. And I really like the framework of we can't all be all of the things, and we can't all be all of the solutions. And if you think about how many humans in the world that want to make a difference here and want to have an impact and want to help, if we all did one thing or something small or each took our own role, it would make a big difference. And we actually need people helping in all the realms. And so we don't have to help in every realm. So Jackie Summers offers this idea of maybe helpers or people who advocate, people who organize, people who are the rebellious ones. He also talks about people who go out and do things and people who stay in and do things, whether it's inside your home or in a hospital setting or in a healthcare setting. And what I want to offer is that we can't all do everything and be everything to the movement. And so choosing the lane or the approach or the specific area that feels most authentic to you and staying out of judgment about what people choose. I see often people saying, well, you can't do this or you should do this or not doing this means X, Y, or Z. And I just want to own we can trust ourselves to show up in a way that feels authentic to us as a way to respond and make a difference. We can always show up in a different way. And the world needs all the different responses right now. And so thinking about which lane or which energy do you want to bring? What do you have the resources and capacity to bring right now? Sometimes what we have the resource and capacity to do is rest, and so that we can step in and maybe do more of a relay to support things. And what if you chose that more from desire or from a inner match or inner knowing rather than guilt? Paying specific attention to our training in medicine that we should be everything to everybody, and just noticing where your tendency might be to show up over responsible, for example, and how can we interrupt those old patterns and show up in a more intentional way. The invitation of last week's yoga class was, what would love do in a moment like this? And the root of it, of course, comes from my TED Talk and my favorite question. But what I want to point out is it's a tool for a pattern interrupt. And so all of our tools for pattern interrupts might be different. And choosing an interrupt that widens your lens or your frame of vision and helps you regulate yourself and helps you step out of some of these older patterns of over responsibility, toxic independence, maybe urgency. And so noticing what pattern interrupt might work for you. And it might be different for all of you. The reason I love that pattern interrupt, and it seems like maybe it's not strong enough for a moment like this. And I actually think it's the perfect question for a moment like this, because it actually interrupts your innate fear. Love doesn't bypass it. It acknowledges it. It sends its compassion. And it brings a different physiology. So that hand to heart can actually help you in a moment like this. You can release oxytocin. You can lessen the cortisol. You can have access to your amygdala, which may be hijacked by the trauma. It can get you a little bit more of that access. It's not going to put you back to perfect. I also love that love can coexist with a lot of other angry emotions, whether it's anger or sadness or grief that things are not the way that we would like them to be. And then I think that it can be a really useful tool in nuanced and complex situations, which is literally where we are.
And I'll offer up some recommendations from positive psychology. So mindset work, which is basically all of coaching, but rather than being allowed to be labeled as victims, could the language change around the word victim into survivorhood or survivorship? And then also prioritizing your own sense of safety, whatever that looks like to you, in the face of choosing your lane and doing advocacy work, if that's what you choose to do, and also maintaining social support, are going to be paramount in the face of what's going on now. In order to do that and be in your best health to do that, recognizing that you'll also have to prioritize your own pillars of health to do so. And lastly, but perhaps most importantly, is that reminding you that getting help helps, which could be a radical act of self-compassion for many people, many who might be listening to this podcast right now, especially when we've been indoctrinated into a career we were trained where toughing it out and enduring is praised, and in many situations actually expected. So to pause as the invitation and to prioritize and realize that there's a lot that's needed to enable healing in the face of current events. Also, if you find yourself in a privileged position, that you can hold space for people who are experiencing a lot of distress right now, mindful communication is going to be so helpful to holding space for this. And we've talked about so much mindful communication on this podcast. We also have taught it and facilitated exercises on it, especially during the Connected Nature retreat. It's a lot of active listening. So as a reminder, you listen mostly and firstly, only if the person actually wants to talk about the distress that they're facing. You don't force them into talking and sharing. You accept and you allow their feelings to be, no judgment, and to continue to keep reaching out to them, to connect with them, not necessarily just for social activities, but even just fun things that might be like more quiet activities, but together. So the Psychology Today article recommends these things to not do, which include to not force someone to talk, to not ask intrusive questions, and to avoid questions like, why? Because sometimes they can, albeit come from a good intentional place, but ultimately come off as victim blaming. Also, to not necessarily offer up advice unless you are asked to do so specifically. Holding space means simply that, holding space for whatever the other person is experiencing just as it is, not necessarily trying to fix in that particular moment. Also, over generalizing statements like, oh, everything happens for a reason, or I know exactly how you feel, that are disingenuous and frankly, potentially patronizing, are not welcome to help another person in moments of distress and trauma.
I just wanted to summarize a little bit of what you said, because I think putting it into buckets might help folks. So what I heard is you can choose to opt out of victimhood if you want, not because you're not a victim, but because the energy of it is draining. We can choose to take care of ourselves, and whether that's first or also is often more accessible for many of us in healing professions. We can show up with non-judgment of ourselves and others. The power of mindfulness and slowness and breathing, and many of the tools that we have taught here. The power of connection and community, and being there with others, for others, and allowing others to be there for us. And then we've talked a bit about how, not in these words, but the intention behind how you want to show up. How will you wish you had shown up? What would you be proud of? How would you wish you had not shown up? You just mentioned a number of ways to not show up. And so I think really thinking your future self 5 years from now, no matter what has happened, how will you be proud of how you showed up today? And what will you wish you had done or not done? And then I love the thought of choosing the energy you want to bring to this moment. Is it healing? Is it love? Is it connection? Can be whatever feels resonant to you. As it's the beginning of the year, maybe it's even applying your words for the year. Like if you showed up for this challenge with that tone and energy, how might that guide you as to what the next steps were? And we didn't talk about this at the beginning, but one of the reasons I nudged you to record this episode is that I felt it was important to talk about it in the moment. But you also said, well, I don't know what to do. And I said, nobody knows what to do. In fact, many of the people who I'm working with, this has come up in coaching all week. And it's like, what should I do? I don't know what to do. How do we respond in a moment like this? And we haven't been in a moment like this. And yet we're also judging, is it going to be enough? Is it going to be the right thing? What if I don't do the right thing? And so to honor that we can't know what to do in the moment. We can only do our best in the moment with the information we have and the tools that we have. But we hope that in this episode, we have given you some specific tools that you can lean into. And at the end, I think we would love to share a few more simple, practical tools as maybe a list of things you could try. Not that you need to try all of them, but maybe pick one to see if it helps. And We would also love for you to join us at Connect in Nature because we practice and teach all of these. And I want to offer that, we lean into these tools when we need them, but the most helpful thing is to practice them when we don't need them so that they're available when we need them. And looking forward at the years ahead, we're going to be needing more and more tools of mindfulness and grounding and regulating our nervous system. And what a beautiful way to do it in community, in connection with each other, and in nature. And I'm going to start with my list, which is nature. Number one, pausing. And number two, taking the time, giving yourself a chance to regroup, reset, show up on purpose, and choosing embodied practices. They're a way to build your capacity and build your toolbox over time for the future. And again, it's incredibly helpful to build them when you're not in crisis or in the lulls of the exciting periods here. And that I can't recommend enough joining me for yoga. I heard from many people, thank you all for your personal feedback. It means the world to me, how helpful the experience is. And to me, it just says this is a year, if there ever was one, to show up for retreats. Take that pause, take that space, do something for yourself and fill up your toolbox. And so those suggestions are bigger suggestions. And I want to hear your in the moment suggestions, Ni-Cheng.
Yeah, so definitely using your breath as a home, coming back to your breath whenever you need to as a focus of attention. And then drawing out their exhale. So taking 3 deep breaths, inhaling through the nose, exhaling through your mouth, blowing out birthday candles, exhaling 2 to 4 times longer than your inhales. And then doing that 3 times. So that's a very quick way in the face of distress to take back some control of your nervous system in the moment. And then I'm going to share again the STOP acronym. So stop in the moment. T is to take a breath. It could be a long exhale breath or just a mindful breath where you are noticing your breath. And then O is to observe, noticing the external circumstances that are causing the distress, noticing your thoughts about them, not getting entangled into the storylines of the thoughts, but simply noticing them, naming your emotions and providing some space for your body sensations just as they are, because all of that is happening in that moment. And then P is to proceed with greater skillful action, proceed with a healthier response, a chosen response. The other tip that I'll share is right now in this moment, hopefully you're feeling rather safe, but what is a quick way for you to feel safe and more grounded? And sometimes it can be as simple as noticing the support of the ground beneath your feet, to bring yourself back into a state of your green zone, a state of safety.
For me, it's hand to heart. That's why I always come back to that. And again, it doesn't mean that needs to be it for you. It's figuring out where's your zone of safety. Where do you find that sense of grounding? So we thank you all for listening today, and we are wishing you all a sense of safety, calm, and moving forward with an intention and a purpose that resonates for you. And we would love to have you join us for Connect in Nature. I would love to have you join me for a retreat, join me for yoga, and a nudge to go back and join us for some of our mindful moments, finding whatever works to help soothe you, your nervous system, and helps you find that space so you can move forward with a little bit more intention. We would also greatly appreciate if you left us some written reviews. We've gotten a few new ones recently, and they help us spread the podcast and its ripple effects. And in the world today, boy, do we need more ripple effects of mindfulness and compassion and intentional ways of moving through the world. So if you could help us spread these messages and share particular podcasts that resonate for you, we would be absolutely most grateful. We look forward to seeing you all again next week.
Thanks for listening. If our message resonates, we'd love to connect further. Join us for coaching, mindfulness experiences, workshops, and retreats. Invite us to speak at your institution or conference. When you work with us, you don't just consume information, you create real change. Find Ni-Cheng Liang at Awakened Breath and Jessie Mahoney at Pause and Presence. Welcome to this mindful moment practice, inviting you to close your eyes or lower your gaze a few inches in front of you. And inviting you, if it's safe to do so, to place your hands atop your heart, noticing the points of contact between your chest and your hands with each other. Sending some loving and kind intentions for the world, for anyone who's suffering. May you be well. May you find peace. May you be happy. May you be free from harm. May you be well. May you find peace. May you be happy. May you be free from harm. May you be well. May you find peace. May you be happy. May you be free from harm. And then inviting ourselves to be part of this global community that has a lot of suffering right now. May we be well. May we find peace. May we be happy. May we be free from harm. May we be well. May we find peace. May we be happy. May we be free from harm. May we be well. May we find peace. May we be happy. May we be free from harm. And as you're ready, inviting those same loving and kind intentions for yourself in these moments of difficulty. May I be well. May I find peace. May I be happy. May I be free from harm. May I be well. May I find peace. May I be happy. May I be free from harm. May I be well. May I find peace. May I be happy. May I be free from harm. Coming back to noticing the sensations of the hands atop your chest, perhaps pushing in just a little. And as you're ready, bringing your hands back down, opening your eyes, letting the light back in. Thank you so much for practicing loving kindness with me today.